Let's take a look at some weaker hives. And these are some that I know are already a little bit on the weak side. So let's take a look at what's considered weak and what we should do about it. So this hive right off the top, right off the bat, you can see that there's just not much going on in the top box. It's pretty much completely empty, which is never something we want to see. Our bottom box, as I'm looking down at the top of it, remember the best time to gauge a beehive's population is in the early morning or in the late evening, and right when you open it up. You can really look down and see how many frames are covered with bees versus not. And so looking down at this one, it really only has maybe 3 frames of brood in it. Three. It'd really be something if I could look between and tell you exactly how many frames of brood it has, how many frames of bees it has, and I can tell you it's got about 3 frames of bees. That's not a lot of bees, even for this time of year, and so I'm definitely concerned about a hive that's this weak. The amazing thing is, we put patties, the global pollen patties in these, like less than a week ago, and they've already eaten everything except for this tiny little square. And honestly, man, that is one of the things I love the most about those global patties that we just started selling here in the South, and it's the reason I use them in my commercial operation, is because the bees eat them so quickly. Even the weaker hives tend to eat the global patties really quickly, and it's just, I've never found a patty yet that beats them. There might be a new patty that comes out that beats it in the future, but for right now, they are by far the best in my opinion. So this hive has several bottom box, but just not a lot of bees, and that's, like I said, that's always concerning. We've got the Apivar strips in, and they just, I believe this hive was queenless earlier in the year, and so that's why they're just so behind. But take a look at this. So a couple things. One, check out the freaking pollen. Isn't that something? These hives, I'm trying to angle it so we can see inside those cells. Look around the edges of the brood. This is a frame of pollen, essentially, with brood in the middle of it. These hives had virtually no pollen in them, a month ago, and now those frames are just full of pollen. So thankful for all the rain we got. So they've got plenty of pollen, and they've got brood, just not a lot of brood. By the way, even though we've got a decent amount of pollen coming in, I still recommend feeding pollen substitute. And that's a debated topic, but even up, when I have bees up in North Dakota or Minnesota, where you've got tons of pollen coming in right now, where it's not hot and dry, I'm still feeding my hives pollen substitute, the pollen patties, at least 6 weeks before the days consistently get in the 50s and 60s. And that's just because the quality of pollen coming in the fall isn't always great. There's often only 1 or 2 colors of pollen coming in, and I want to make sure that my bees have all the nutrition that they need getting ready for winter. And if they don't have all the nutrition they need, they're not going to be able to raise healthy enough baby bees to survive the winter. And so pollen substitute, some years it may not be necessary, but it's a cheap form of insurance, in my opinion, to give them a couple pollen patties per month, August through October really, just to make sure my bees have the food that they need. And this, they've got a full frame of brood right here. You can see both sides, cap brood. So they've got a full frame of brood. That other frame was about a half a frame of brood. This next frame has a little bit of brood on it, but not much. Mostly just pollen and honey, a little bit of brood there in the middle. So really we've got a hive with about 3 frames of bees, plenty of honey, good pollen, and about maybe 2 frames of brood cumulatively. So our decision right now is, do we combine it with another hive, or do we give it a frame of brood and see if they can grow enough in the next 6 weeks to pull through? So because we're out here, if I probably just go ahead and combine this hive with another one. And I would combine it because the bees look healthy. They've got good brood. You know, there's nothing wrong with the hive. They just went queenless at some point and they raised the new queen too late. So I would just separate this hive from its bottom board, and I would pick up this whole box and I would just set this whole entire box on top of another hive and let them merge into one hive. You can put newspaper between them and combine them that way. Honestly, when I'm out in the bee yard, I don't bother with newspaper. I just stick the hives together, and there's a little bit of fighting, but the next day there's not more than a couple dozen dead bees in the front of the hive. So it's not as necessary as many think to, you know, put a sheet of newspaper between two weak hives if you're combining them. But I would put it together with another hive that maybe also only has 2 or 3 frames of brood and bees, and together they very well may survive the winter, especially since we've got about 6 weeks for them to still grow. Now, if they were more like 3 or 4 frames of brood and maybe 5 or 6 frames of bees, so maybe a half, I would probably just give them some frames of brood from a stronger hive and see if they can make it. And that's as simple as we could go back to a strong hive, take out some frames of cat brood, shake the bees off of that cat brood, and I would put those frames of cat brood right in the middle of this hive, not more than 1, maybe 2 frames of cat brood, and really just give them a boost in population, and then they'll most likely pull through and survive the winter if we do that.